in Israel, the anti-Zionist camp is practically all descended from Matzpen, and the people who weren't in Matzpen now will say that they were. And one formation that takes shape around the beginning of the first Intifada, around 2001, is a group of anarchists, first acting without even bothering with a name for the group. It was a loose collection of people. Thanks. Loose collection that would pick different names for different actions. One week it was Jews Against Ghettos, and the next week it was Anarchists Against the Wall. The name Anarchists Against the Wall stuck because on the day that that name was picked, an Israeli activist was shot in both legs and nearly bled to death. And in the subsequent rush or wave of media attention, the name got stuck and remained with it. This group had some of its social roots in punk culture and animal rights movement, which I guess have their overlap internationally. And this is another common feature for the anti-Zionist politics in Israel. Much of it is rooted outside. Much of the anarchist movement in Israel consists of people who got their political education abroad, including myself, who got it at U of T. And in that sense, I think that the anarchist movement in Israel is more a continuation of the international movement in Israel than a descendant of the Israeli movement, with the exception of Matzpen connections and some inspiration by Matzpen, and some Matzpen members who are still in their 70s, very active. And the type of work that this anarchist group that was stuck with the name Anarchists Against the Wall was involved with is different from Matzpen, although it shares with it its anti-Bolshevism and anti-Zionism. It isn't at all an intellectual movement. The effort and the work is done as much as possible on the ground, and the work on the ground was to join a Palestinian popular movement that started to resist around the construction of the separation wall around 2000 and early 2003. It was predicted then, and turned out to be true, that there was never any intention to complete this wall. The wall was constructed as an instrument of confiscating more Palestinian land and separating Palestinians from their land. And an indication of this can be seen in a rare case where you could get a test case to see what the political meaning of something is, and that's the case of the wall around Jerusalem. In that case, Israel has the opportunity to build a wall, to complete the wall around Jerusalem, cutting off Jerusalem from Ma'ale Adumim, a settlement built to the east of it. And the other option that Israel has is not to close the wall around Jerusalem, but leave it open for the opportunity, the future opportunity, to extend the wall around Ma'ale Adumim. So there's a test. If Israel is interested in protecting from terror attacks, you would think that they want to protect Jerusalem the most. It was, after all, attacked the most. And if the wall is constructed to, if the first objective of the wall is to protect against attacks, you would have closed down the gap, the eastern gap in the wall around Jerusalem. But if a more important objective is to grab more land, then you would leave that open and wait for the opportunity where you get permission from the Americans to do that. Presumably after a particularly horrendous terror attacks, it would be a good time to announce that now we're extending the wall east. So just wait for that to happen, or wait for American permission to do that some other way. So far, the Americans have not allowed this construction, but the wall has not been closed off around Jerusalem as well. The Palestinian movement that started to resist this wall had several new features compared to the Second Intifada. First of all, it was based in the villages because that's where the wall was built. The people who led the resistance were the ones most directly affected by it. Villagers whose own land was being confiscated are the ones that initiated the demonstrations and participated in them. Another new feature was that it was open for internationals. Perhaps the new feature was in the international movement that was finally showed up in Palestine to support it. It's hard to say what came first, but it is true that this movement was open for outsiders. First, the international solidarity movement, and later on, through them, and I think in a way as an extension of them, also individual Israelis, starting from one, and then larger numbers that eventually came together to form a group with its own identity. The strategy is for the Israelis is simple. The Palestinians are demonstrating, and they initiate the struggle and make the important decisions, such as when and how to resist. The job for Israelis is relatively simple. When we're invited, show up. Although the anarchist group is not an intellectual one, there is, I think, in this respect, an important meaning to the politics of anarchism, and that is the emphasis on power dynamics and the sensitivity to them and to questions of privilege and working across lines of privilege is something that's emphasized more in the anarchist tradition than in, say, a Leninist tradition or other, to say nothing of the Zionist left. Anarchists, I think, are particularly suited to be outsiders joining the movement led by indigenous people, because we are aware of those power dynamics and I think understand better than other political tendencies the role that outsiders should play in such a situation. I think that this combination has proved quite successful in the sense that, given the resources that were available, the popular struggle against the wall in the second Intifada was nothing like the scale of popular resistance in the first Intifada. The first Intifada, there could be hundreds of demonstrations in the same day. This movement is nothing on that scale. However, it's proven itself to be very resilient. It's been 10 years now of a constant attempt by Israel to crush this movement. After all, Israel's managed to crush the popular struggle in the first Intifada in less than 10 years, much less than 10 years. This movement, maybe it's a form of jiu-jitsu. It's smaller, and maybe that makes it harder to crush. But also, I think the fact that outsiders have finally joined it also contributes to its resilience. Another I think, indication of the success of this movement is that in the beginning, there was a particular role and a particular need for internationals and Israelis in certain what used to be more skilled tasks that came with political capital that outsiders would have. Simple things such as getting reports out to the press, video photography, still photography, contact with diplomats or legal support. The mechanics of politics that are, like many other things, are easier for people with more political capital. This is less and less the case, and that's, I think, a good indication that we're not needed so much anymore. Palestinians shoot their own video. Some of them are nominated for Oscars. They have their own media. They have their own social media and their own reporters and legal support. I think that that's an indication of the health of the movement. That if outsiders were needed in the past, it's less the case, less so the case now. Another, I think, healthy indication in the fact that outsiders are needed less is perhaps the fact that this movement is reaching out to the cities as well. There is a big political difference between Palestinian villages and Palestinian cities, especially when it comes to outsider support. It's much easier to invite outsiders into a small village where knowing one person or one family will let the rest of the community know that they can trust you. That is much more difficult in a city. It's much harder if you're in a mass movement in Betunia or Ramallah. Not everybody there is going to immediately know what it is that you're doing there. It might be confusing, unsettling, or worrying to some of the people around you. And unlike a small village that it's enough that you're introduced by one person that everybody knows, it's much less natural for outsiders to participate in a mass struggle, in mass movement in a city. The fact that the popular struggle against the wall is now reaching into the cities is, I think, another reason why outsiders are less essential. And again, I think we have said it from the beginning that one of the first signs that this movement will become truly a mass movement is that we outsiders are going to become irrelevant. And that's just fine. We can amuse ourselves some other ways.